where better to spend a bank holiday weekend than in England's garden, Kent, and the legendary Grand Patch Grand Prix circuit.
But before qualifying got underway this morning, we managed to catch up with a few of the drivers in the paddock area.
Well, it's just amazing, isn't it? I mean, we're really hoping to lead the class. I mean, the other Lamborghinis are fairly competitive. One of them's got a pro driver in there, so it's always quite tough. But we honestly didn't expect to be leading the whole championship. But we'll just keep going and take each race as it is. And it's a new car to both of us. It's especially new to me. Driving my old Marcos for so many years, this is a whole different world. But really enjoying it. It's great.
You've been around GT Cup long enough to know, though, there's a long way to go in this championship.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it is all about finishing. It's all about gaining points. Even if you lose, if you mess one race and lose 25 points or something, it takes a long time to catch that back up. So we're always looking for points, all the way through.
So, Tom, great to see you making your debut in the GT Cup Championship. You joined James Guest in the Feathers Motorsport Aston Martin, a car you know well.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the car, but this is my first time running with Feathers Motorsport. Filling in for Darren Turner this weekend as he's out racing at the Nürburgring. But yeah, we're testing yesterday. Really positive day with the car and meeting the team, and I'm looking forward to the races.
So what's it like getting back in the Aston Martin GT4, a car you know well because you won the British GT Championship in 2019 in it?
Yes, this is a car I know really well. It's my first weekend racing the car with this team, and working with James Guest, who's also now got a bit of experience under his belt in the car. We're working well together and making a lot of progress through practice.
And a busy 2021 season for you as well as you concentrate on other championships.
Yeah, I'm also racing in the GT4 European Series with Mirage Racing, also in the Vantage GT4 car, and it's nice, they complement each other. Plenty of seat time and improving all the time.
So there we go. Great to catch up with some of the drivers in the paddock area earlier on over the course of this morning, and we'll see how things pan out for their race, which will be coming up very, very shortly. Just one of the support races is just taking the checkered flag, as you can see, and then once the circuit has been cleared, we'll begin to see our cars head out onto the grid. Most of the names will be familiar with you. There are some new cars that are entered over the course of this weekend. They might not be in for the full season, therefore they will be running as an invitational class in reality, so they will not be eligible for championship points. They will be, in the nicest possible way, invisible or ignored when it comes to the championship points scoring. There were a few cars also that had a few small issues over the course of qualifying this morning. Now, one of them actually lines up on the front row of the grid. Sounds strange, doesn't it? And that it had problems, but it's still going to line up on the front row of the grid. And that was the JMH Automotive number 55 car, which will be driven by John Seal in this race. The Lamborghini Huracan, prepared by JMH Automotive, had some ABS problems over the course of this morning. Jamie Stanley went out in free practice in it, and as the pro driver, couldn't take part in qualifying and can't take part in the sprint race. They reset that system to ensure that everything was fine with the car. However, when John Seal went out to qualify, there was still that same issue with it. So he got a good lap in and then parked the car to allow the team as much time as possible to sort it out. So fingers crossed that is all sorted. We also saw issues for the number 4 Triple M Motorsport Tech Serve Nissan Nismo GTR3 that Graham Tilley will be driving. Will Tregurtha is partnered with him again this weekend, but again, as the pro driver, cannot take part in this sprint race. And that was an upshift problem with the car. I was chatting to both Will and to Graham after the qualifying session. It only did 3 laps in qualifying, and they weren't at that stage sure whether it was a mechanical issue with the gearbox or whether it was an electronic issue with that gearbox. But it was doing some strange things and almost wanting to upshift itself was the information that I was given. So it's still qualified 6th quickest, so it's still towards the sharp end of the grid, but Will Tregurtha suggesting the time that it posted was probably at least a couple of seconds shy of what they would expect to be posting in that car. There is the championship leading car. So mentioned earlier on that Warren Gilbert and Jensen Lund lead the championship. There is the championship leading car. Jensen Lund will be driving it in this race. I'll give you the full grid in a short while, but that is the car that currently leads the championship standings. It's the points you accumulate in your respective group that count. So subject to the number of starters in the group, then it's 25 championship points if you claim a win in your group, 18 for second, 15 for third. If there are fewer starters in the group, you do end up with a reduction in terms of the championship points that are available. So in other words, if there's just 2 starters in the group, then 18 points would be the win rather than the 25. And if you are the sole representative in a group, it's just 15. But it's fair to say such is the strength of the GT Cup Championship in 2021. Then it is going to be pretty much full championship points, I think, for every single group. So that is great to see as the cars are starting to nose their way out of the garage. That's the sister car for Top Cats Racing. That's the Marcos Mantis, and making its debut in the GT Cup Championship, there's Charlotte Gilbert, who will be, I think, sharing with Steve Glynn that Marcus. It's Steve that's going to be driving in this race. He will already be in the cockpit, but we could just briefly see to the opposite side of that the Brabham, which makes its debut in the championship. There is the Brabham. We were expecting it to be out earlier on in the season, but a few little issues along the way. But the fantastic 5.4 litre V8 engine can produce up to 700 brake horsepower. Now, because of the balance of performance in GT Cup, it's actually running just 60% throttle, that car, to try and peg it back to to make equivalent all of the cars in that group. And it's an important car that Paul Bailey, who's got a fabulous collection of supercars, drives with the pro driver, the Scottish driver Ross Wiley. That is the only racing Brabham in Europe. So David Brabham is here supporting that car. Sounds absolutely fantastic. Qualified though, 4th in its group GTO, and 11th on the grid. So there's a bit of work for Paul to do, but as we say, it's a car that has had a few little niggles over the course of the beginning of the season. So we've largely seen Paul Bailey and Ross Wiley out in their Ferraris. So it's good seat time for Paul Bailey, and again, sort of getting back up to speed with what is a pretty unique car, to say the least. There's one of the Group GTH competitors. That's the number 15 car, which is going to be starting in the hands of David Holloway, run by Century Motorsport. He will be sharing the car, you can see on the side of it, with Bradley Ellis, who is a BRDC member. Bradley is a former British GT champion. Is Bradley Ellis, so it's a very strong pro driver that sits in that car. Bradley was a British GT champion back in 2007, but David Holloway, who was runner-up in Group GTH back in 2018 in the GT Cup, is the AM driver. Therefore, he is the only driver that can take part in this aspect of the race, the sprint races. And as we continue our way down the pits, there is another one of the Century Motorsport cars, Century Motorsport being owned and run by Nathan Freak, who is a very quick driver himself. That is James Kellett, the pro driver, just chatting away to Alex Stevenson. Now, they run in Group GTA, which I'll tell you a little bit more about the groups in due course. But for Alex Stevenson, he was 3rd in Group GTA back in the 2020 championship season. So the cars all nudging their way out of the garages. All of the cars having, of course, in these conditions, slick Pirelli tyres bolted on, such as the way the championship regulations are written. The vast majority were testing yesterday, and it was dry in the morning, so they got used to these conditions yesterday in the morning in testing, but it was very wet here in Norfolk in the afternoon, so most of them also got to sample running on the Control Pirelli treaded tyre that they all run. So cars being prepared. There's the glorious Porsche 935 clone of Richard Chamberlain, a car which harks back to the 70s, really, the base chassis. I showed Richard just before this session got underway, or is about to get underway. I showed him a picture of his car back at the time that he bought it earlier on. He wasn't aware that I got it on my phone, and he hasn't got the picture himself, so I'm going to forward him the picture. But that's a car that, over the course of the last 20 or so years, has just been developed and developed and developed. It had a significant rebuild in 2020 and has again just been tinkered with by CTR Developments, company owned and run by Richard Chamberlain. And it's great to see that car out, because Richard, it's fair to say, has been a stalwart of the GT Cup Championship for many, many a year. There's the cars queuing up in pit lane, so shouldn't be long before they are released onto the grid on the build-up to round 7 of the championship season. Now, that is another one of the cars that had problems in qualifying. No, that's John Dillon's car, so John Dillon had no issues in qualifying. He's another very, very quick driver is John Dillon in terms of qualification, 4th quickest in qualifying. Now he runs in Group GT3, which is for the GT3 homologated cars. So the cars all starting to nudge their way out. And that's James Guess. Now, in terms of the Sprint Challenge, which is points accumulated just in these sprint races, he leads that championship by just a single point at this stage from the car of Craig Wilkins, which is the number 80 car, which is sort of the garage alongside him in reality. So that is James Guess. You regularly sharing with Works Aston Martin driver and Le Mans podium finisher Darren Turner. But for this weekend, it's not Turner that shares the car with him. It's young Tom Canning that shares the car, who has been racing in the Asian Le Mans series over the course of the last few seasons. Now, that's one of the Stanbridge Motorsport Lamborghinis. That's the number 41 car, which is going to be Fraser Smart for this race. So Fraser Smart, James Simons and Graham Wilson all scheduled to drive the car over the course of the season, hence why that car's got 3 names on the side of it. There's Graham Tilley's car, hopefully now with its gearbox woes done and dusted. There is the reigning championship car, the number 1 car, which is not Simon Orange for this race. That is Josh Jackson that is in that particular car, the pair of them having won the GT Cup Championship overall last year. And that's the car that qualified on pole position. Richard Neary at the wheel of the Team ABBA Racing Mercedes GT3 car that he shares with his son Sam Neary, who has recently been accepted into the BRDC Rising Stars programme. So that is a car that certainly we may well be seeing a lot of over the course of this race. So just to guide you through the groups, Group GT3 is for homologated GT3 cars that run to GT3 specification. In other words, you might see them in the GT World Challenge or the domestic British GT Championship in the GT3 class. Group GTO is for open specification cars, so low volume manufacturers. Could also encompass likes of GT2 cars and GTE cars or modified challenge cars. But again, GTO is an area where certainly lots of balance of performance is done by the technical team to equalise the performance of all of the cars. Group GTC is for late model year challenge and cup cars. Now that could be something like a Ferrari challenge car, or in particular for 2021 we see a lot of Lamborghini Huracan Super Trofeo cars coming into Group GTC. Group GTB is for earlier challenge cars, tends to be the likes of Porsche 911 Cup cars that we see in Group GTE. Group GTH is for homologated GT4 cars, so again it's cars that you might see in the European GT4 Challenge, you might see them racing out in some of the IMSA classes out in America, or of course again domestically in the UK you could see them in the British GT Championship. And for Group GTA, that is for lower specification Cup and Challenge cars or one make series cars, and that seems to be dominated nowadays by the likes of Ginetta G55s that run to Super Cup specification. So that is the way that the groups work in the 2021 GT Cup Championship. You can see just how warm it is here at Snetterton as the cars are heading out onto the grid. So as they make their way around this circuit, we are circulating on the full Snetterton 300 circuit. So it's not quite 3 miles. The 200 circuit is not quite 2 miles. The 300 circuit is not quite 3 miles. It's a whisker away, though, because it is 2.9689 miles round. And for pole position, the time that was set by Sam Neary, who qualified the car, was a 1 minute 49.045. That equates to, considering that there's some tight and twisty sections in it with the likes of the Wilson hairpin and the Agostini hairpin and Brundle and Nelson, average speed for that pole position time, 98.01 miles per hour. So if you imagine that's the average speed around the circuit, just think as to what they are doing, particularly at the bottom of the Bentley Straight, when the cars can really start to stretch their legs and get up to, well, not quite their maximum speed, but they will certainly be heading up towards the middle part of three figures and beyond down the Bentley Straight. So fantastic sunshine that we are blessed with. The variants of the cars that are out there as well, with the likes of Mercedes, Lamborghini, Porsche, Nissan, Radical, Aston Martin, Brabham, Ginetta, all represented on the grid. And therefore, we continually say, it is probably one of the most varied championships for GT cars, if not in the UK, then possibly in Europe as well. Season after season after season, more and more marques are represented. Here comes up onto position the third placed car, Richard Chamberlain. Rolling start, remember, that we will have for the GT Cup Championship. And as it is the sprint race, there's no pit stop windows to worry about, so it will be a straight off 25-minute pretty much flat out race for the cars. That's the number 55 Lamborghini. That's the car that I said had problems with the ABS sensor over the course of the qualification session. Didn't really affect its grid position. Here comes the number 4 Nissan into position. That's the car that had the gearbox or upshift issues with it, having spoken to Will Tregurtha. Will is another former British GT champion, actually, Will Tregurtha, having stepped up from the Ginetta Junior Championship, Will Tregurtha, which he secured as the champion in 2016. He then became the champion the following year, himself and Stuart Middleton, in the British GT Championship in the GT4 class. But this is the all-important pole-sitting car, the number 88 ABBA Racing Mercedes AMG GT3, safely handed into the hands of 54-year-old Richard Neary for this one. Richard Neary was a champion in British GT in 2017. That was in the GT3 AM class. Did a few seasons in British GT. He's dovetailing his commitments with both the GT Cup Championship and British GT for this year. So it's a busy car. It is a busy team as well, because they are, say, concentrating on 2 separate championships and certainly are at the sharp end of the GT Cup Championship. They are leading the GT Cup Group GT3 Championship standings quite comfortably by 40 plus points and are lying second overall in the standings, but they will line up alongside this car here, John Seal. Always a smile on John Seal's face, a thumbs up from John. Sharing with another former British GT champion, actually, Jamie Stanley. So that's the number 55 car. John is a champion in the GT Cup. He was the GT3 champion last year. He was the GTO champion back in 2019 and was the GTC champion back in 2014. So he's been around this particular championship and others for a good number of years now, and did dip his toe into the British GT Championship last year as well as committing to the GT Cup. So nice warm ambient temperatures, so shouldn't take long on this rolling lap to get the tyres up to temperature. There's John Dillon, who has had a good start to the season so far at the wheel of his GT3 Lamborghini, being run by Scott Sport. He lies third in the championship standings, chatting to his pro driver that he shares the car with, Phil Quaife. John Dillon's best finish of the season so far was a 2nd place overall at Brands Hatch, but he's had a couple of 4th places overall, a 5th place overall, but solid, good thing is solid accumulation of points. And as we heard from Warren Gilbert earlier on when we caught up with him in the paddock area of the VT that we showed you earlier on, Warren suggesting it's all about consistency, and certainly John Dillon and Phil Quaife, both collectively and in the case of the sprint races, John Dillon driving singularly, has had consistency, and that's what you want over the course of a season if you want to try and lift not just the group championship crown but the overall championship crown. So the officials and the team members being asked to leave the grid. You can see the spectator banks in the background are well, not full of spectators, because we are still, due to the current COVID restrictions, limited to the amount of spectators that are allowed into the venue. and certainly for some parts of the circuit, spectators will not be allowed to get into the paddock areas and get into the pit lane areas, and even that spectator bank I think you saw in the background is highly likely to be team members, because I think that is an area where you can only access by coming through the paddock, so that is probably also blocked off to what will be the spectator areas. So the enormous grid, you can see how far back on the centre straight it stretches, and well, we are going to get the first of our 4 races, round 7 of the 2021 Championship very shortly underway. The countdown continuing. The key to it is going to be trying to build a bit of temperature into these tyres, and in particular the brakes over the course of this warming up lap, and with the warm temperatures shouldn't be too much of an issue for the cars and the drivers to make sure that when the lights go out at the end of the rolling lap, which will very shortly start, that we are going to be ready to go for 25 minutes of action for the GT Cup Championship. So off they go on their final formation lap. There goes the Brabham Parstar shot. Fantastic noise that it makes, and with all of the cars in their respective groups heading off onto the last lap that they'll be doing before we get round 7 of the championship underway, we can, I'm sure, guide you through the grid for this one. And the way that it will stack up is that it is Richard Neary that starts on pole position, John Seal sitting alongside. Row 2 of the grid is Richard Chamberlain and John Dillon. As we head onto the 3rd row of the grid, it is Lucky Kira and Graham Tilley that line up on the 3rd row of the grid, alongside Ben Dimmock in the Radical and Jensen Lund, the championship leader, at the wheel of the number 9 car. Row 4 of the grid is where we see, row 5 of the grid is Sam Random and Mike Brown, with row 6 being Paul Bailey and Nick Phelps. The 7th row of the grid is where we see Chris Hart on the 7th row of the grid, alongside Josh Jackson that sits alongside, and after that it will be Simon Orange that lines up with Craig Wilkins alongside him on that row of the grid. On to row number 8 of the grid, it is Carl Cavers and James Guest. Row 9 of the grid is going to be James Townsend for this particular race, with Mike Price sitting alongside. Then when we move outside of the top 20, the number 26 car will be started by Mo Ritson alongside his David Holloway, with Morgan Tilbrook lining up alongside the number 41 car, which will be started by Fraser Smart. As we move outside and into the cars outside of the top 24, Mark Hopton lines up alongside Chris Murphy. Steve Ruston is going to line up alongside what will be the number 28 car, which is going to be driven by Kemp in this particular race. And then when we get towards the tail end of the field, the number 29 car will be the car that is in the hands, well, it should be Andy Roby for the number 29 car. Let's have a look. No, it's number 92 car, which is Rob Myers, I apologise, alongside number 30, which sits alongside. And then it is going to be Steve Glynn, then Andy Roby at 32nd on the grid. And the final few rows of the grid, Alex Stevenson lines up alongside the number 34 car, which sits alongside. Then it will be David Frankland, and at the tail end of the field, racing for Team Hard, a one-off appearance for Andrew Flintoff, Freddie Flintoff, who is at the tail end of the field, who is making a one-off appearance in the GT Cup Championship. We'll only see both himself and Chris Harris out today because they have other commitments over the course of the weekend. So that's the way that they line up for this 7th round of the championship. Richard Neary lines up there on the pole position. His is the black and the green car. Alongside him is John Seal at the wheel of the Lamborghini. Row 2 of the grid is the orange Porsche of Richard Chamberlain alongside John Dillon's car. They get themselves into neat 2x2 order. There are 25 minutes on the clock, and we're about to get round 7 of the 2021 GT Cup Championship underway here at Snetterton. Red lights on, the red lights go out, and they charge their way up towards Ritchie's. There's already a little bit of bodywork flying around in the background, so there's been a little bit of contact somewhere in the pack, but everybody is safely away. John Seal is side by side with Richard Chamberlain, and the Porsche goes through and up into 2nd position, but that was very tight as the pair of them almost got together as they turn their way in towards Ritchie's. Richard Neary leads the race. Richard Chamberlain runs a little bit wide onto the brakes, heading in towards the braking area for Wilson, and then as they work their way out of the corner, the speeds will begin to build once more. Chamberlain's still there in what will be 2nd position, John Seal in 3rd place, but it certainly looks as though everybody is safely through the first few corners as they tail end of the field work their way round through Palmer. John Dillon is now up into 3rd place. John Seal has dropped down into 4th position. You can see they're side by side and nose to tail in various lines. Everybody just treading gingerly in the early stages, just to make sure they don't trip over each other. David Holloway running a little bit wide at the wheel of the Aston Martin, and then problems and onto the grass, and I'm afraid that is the Fox Motorsport car of James Townsend that's had a problem. So you can see the bodywork flapping on that car. That might have been the little bit of contact that we saw at the start when there was bodywork flying, and there, I'm afraid to say, there is also problems, and I was talking about consistency on a car, and that's John Dillon that's either got a front left puncture, but the wheel doesn't appear to be rotating, which suggests it could be a suspension issue on that car. So John Dillon, Mr. Consistency throughout the course of the season, he's going to have to limp that car back round to the pit lane, and I'm not sure, to be honest, in the 25-minute sprint race, what the Scott Sport team can do about it. So that allows Richard Neary to have a handy lead now over Richard Chamberlain in second position. As the cars carve their way round through the sweeping right-hander at Corham and then in towards the braking area for Murray's. We'll pick up on the squabbles that are going on throughout the course of the groups as the race wears on. So over the start-finish line, they will work their way. Good fight going on between the championship winners from last year, Josh Jackson, fighting away with car number 212, which was the Make It Happen Racing Ginetta in the hands of Chris Hart, both of those having qualified on pole position in their respective group. Group GTH for the McLaren, Group GTA for the Ginetta. So through and over the start-finish line, they've all gone. The Radical, which for this race is in the hands of Ben Dimmock, sitting there 6th in the race overall. That is 3rd in its particular group, but it's got the championship leading car behind, and that was a small off as well. That's Simon Orange that's had a small moment, has been able to recover, but I suspect that will have lost in places. He was running in 15th position at the start of the lap. Best fight at the moment is for the final place inside the top 10. We're looking at it, which is Josh Jackson fighting away with the Ginetta, as we say, which is going to be in the hands of Chris Hart, and Chris Hart is coming under attack as well from Nick Phelps at the wheel of the Porsche. So that's a Group GTH car holding off a Group GTA car, and a Group GTB car trying to join in on the front as well. Into the pit lane has come John Dillon. There is the somewhat damaged Fox Motorsport Ginetta of James Townsend. Lots of gaffer tape being applied to the front end of James Townsend's car. That's a real shame for the driver who was racing the Porsche Carrera Cup last year. Did a bit of Ginetta GT5 racing in the past. For John Dillon, quick change of tyre. Yes, it was a puncture for him. Now, let's hope that he can get that car back out again, get it circulating and pick up some sort of championship points. Great fight, though, going on for 2nd, 3rd and 4th now. Lucky Kira, who is also racing in the British GT Championship this year, is looking to try and attack the car of John Seal. Is he going to be able to get through as they head up towards Richie's corner? No, John Seal just making sure he protects the inside line. Lucky Kira can't get through. The Nissan of Graham Tilley not that far away either. So that's 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and you could argue 5th. Not quite all on top of each other, but what it is doing is it's allowing Richard Neary to pull away in the lead of the race all of the time. He now leads after just 2 laps by 4 3/4 seconds is the advantage that he has. Richard Chamberlain falling away all of the time. And that is also a problem, and I'm afraid to say that's one of the Greystone McLarens that has had the bonnet pop up and damage the windscreen. You can see it, and for Mark Hopton, that's at the end of the Bentley Straight. That must have been a very scary moment for him. Now he'll bring the car back round again, but with the damaged windscreen, that is going to spell retirement for him. As for James Townsend's car, well, Fox Motorsport applying lots of gaffer tape to the front of it, and then we should hopefully see him back out into the race to try and at least pick up an odd point or two in terms of the championship. But for Richard Neary, on his merry way, last time through, set the fastest lap of the race that we've seen so far on the first of the flying laps, 1 minute 53.363. But as everything gets up to temperature and the drivers settle in, I would imagine he's going to go even quicker this time around, and therefore the lead advantage may well grow to over 5 seconds potentially. Through goes Ben Dimmock, he's sitting in 6th position. Richard Neary safely on his merry way, and remember, this is a car which leads the GT3 Championship standings and lies 2nd overall in the Championship standings. Of the 6 previous races that we have had, 4 overall wins for Team ABBA Racing, who originally were not going to do the full Championship season, but because it's gone so well, they've decided that they are in for the season, and certainly more than in for a shout of, if not the Group GT3 overall championship, possibly the actual overall GT Cup Championship. But there's a long way to go, because after here at Snetterton, we've got races at Alton Park, at Silverstone, at Donington Park, and back to Snetterton for the championship finals, scheduled to be over the 2nd and 3rd of October. Big lick of flame as the unburnt fuel ignites coming out of Richard Chamberlain's exhaust. He's having to work hard though in second place, because John Seal is not that far away at the wheel of the Lamborghini. Clearly everything is sorted with regards to the ABS issue that they had with that number 55 car over the course of qualifying. And this is actually not just for 2nd and 3rd, this is for the lead of the group as well, Group GTO, which is for the open specification cars. So that would be not just a change for position, that would be a change for group position and the lead as well. Now, if they start to squabble and hold each other up, it might just allow the GT3 Lamborghini of Lucky Kira to come through. So John Seal, key corner that, out of Williams. You need to get a clean exit coming out of Williams, because the Bentley Straight is one of the longest in the UK. And it's so important that you get a good exit coming out of that corner and propel yourself all the way down the straight and in towards this section here. The left-hander at Brundle, and a slightly tighter right-hander at Nelson. So Porsche from Lamborghini, and that, I'm afraid, former champions that have had problems. That's the number 44 car that's had a rotation. Steve Ruston has clearly had a small issue there. That's at Agostini. He will rejoin, but that will have dropped that car well and truly down through the order in the hands of the Group GT8 champion from last year, but the overall champions from the year prior. 4th place Lucky Kira pressing on. Lies 2nd in his group at the moment, 4th overall. Lucky, who has had a best result so far of a 2nd position. That was at the opening weekend at racing at Donington Park. Other than that, it's been a couple of 6th places along the way as his next best finishes. So he'd be desperate to try and at least move up onto the overall podium slots if he can. But he's got John Dillon's Lamborghini that lies just ahead. Now, they do run in different groups, those Lamborghinis, so they are running subtly different specification. John Dillon's in Group GTO. It's a full GT3 homologated car. That car there, car number 247, in the hands of the man from the West Midlands. So up towards the left-hander at Agostini, accelerate their way down the short straight up towards the very fast left-hand flick at Hamilton. Very easy to just run wide there, carry a bit too much speed into it, and then as soon as you're out of Hamilton, you're onto the brakes and in towards the right-hander at Oggies, which has a slightly tighter line going into it, but you could just let the car run a little bit wide on the way out. But this, again, is the key corner, isn't it, Williams? Get a good exit out of Williams, because you carry that momentum all the way down the Bentley Straight. And Lucky Kira is pushing as hard as he can to try and get right up onto terms with the car ahead. Now there is the recovering Steve Ruston. He's about to work his way past Rob Myers at the wheel of the Porsche Cayman, one of a couple of Caymans that are prepared and run by Veluga Motorsport. Now there was a little yellow flashing light there, which suggests that something might have happened out on circuit. Not sure from the angle we were looking at whether the overtake was done before they got to that point of the circuit. And I think yellow flag on the start line might suggest we've got a safety car coming out. Indeed, yes we have. Yellow flag starting to come out around the circuit, which means we are going full course caution. So safety car out on track. That will bring everybody to a neutral status, and that's a big shame really for Richard Neary, who was breaking away in the lead of the race. I do wonder who it might be for, possibly. Now, we know of the issue with Mark Hopton and the windscreen of the McLaren. What we don't know is, from where we saw it and the car got moving again, where he ended up. So is it that McLaren that is deemed to be not in the safe place? It could be debris, possibly, because there is part of a bonnet of a Ginetta, and we already saw the Fox Motorsport car come into the pit lane in the hands of James Townsend. Lots of gaffer tape applied to it. I wonder if there was still a little bit of a hole somewhere in the bodywork which allowed the air to get underneath, and therefore it sort of ripped that fiberglass bonnet away. So it could well be a reason for the safety car. If we've got debris on the track, and a sizable piece of debris, and it's a difficult position for the marshals to get out to recover it and get back in, because there's not a large enough gap in the traffic, then yeah, little choice but to throw the safety car. So that will bunch all of the field up. So last time through, it was a 1 minute 52.9 6.71 was the fastest lap that was set by Richard Neary. He did have a 6.2, or 6.25 second advantage over Richard Chamberlain. And there are still 14 minutes to go in this race. I think the time was showing there were 4 minutes to go, but it is a 25-minute race. So there are just under 14 minutes now of this race still remaining. The opening race for the weekend for the GT Cup Championship, rounds 7 through to round 10 will take place here. And then we'll move to a single-day format with rounds 11 and 12 taking place on the 3rd of July at Alton Park. That's in Cheshire. We're on the international circuit there before rounds 13 through to 16 head to Silverstone and the Grand Prix circuit, where the cars can really open up the taps and stretch their legs. The penultimate round, 17 through to 20, Donington Park. We started the season there, but that was on the national circuit. We returned there in September on the Grand Prix circuit. And as we say, the 21st through to 24th rounds of the championship, we are back here at Snetterton and on the same format as well. So there's the Top Cats Racing Garage looking on. Charlotte Gilbert to the left of the screen giving us a wave. She'll be out later on. It is Steve Glynn who returns to the GT Cup Championship. Steve spoke to me earlier on and he was saying it's been some years, it's been 6 years since he really sat in a powerful car. He did do a C1 24-hour race both at Rockingham and at Silverstone, but a Citroen C1 doesn't have the power at all of that number 3 at Marcos. And there is Freddie Flintoff. So there is the former England cricket captain. This is his first ever race and he's had very little track time as well. Did a bit of testing in October at Donington Park, but then of course COVID struck again with the second wave, so that meant that he wasn't able to test at Donington Park and at other circuits. He did a bit more testing at the likes of Blyton, and I think they've been down to Dunsfold recently to do a little bit more testing down there, but he's had very, very little seat time. I was talking to his driver coach and works Ginetta driver, Michael Simpson, and he said, you know, Fred, it's his first ever race. He's done very little competitive racing before, and as a sportsman, of course, he wants to do a good job, but he said the equivalent would be like me as a racing driver being the opening batsman when you go in against the West Indies or something like that. That's the kind of, you know, huge leaps that Fred Flintoff is having to make, and it's fair to say he's been making them because from yesterday through to today he's found 6 seconds out on track, so he's getting quicker and quicker and quicker all of the time. And I think when they had the wet session yesterday afternoon, he was more comfortable on the treaded tyre than on the slick. So again, it's just trying to get his head around the fact that slick tyre delivers its grip in an entirely different way to the wet tyre does. But hats off to Freddie Flintoff for coming out this weekend. And he said to me earlier on, he wants to stay out of trouble. He knows he's only in for today, and other people have a championship to think about. But equally as much, he wants to go away from here knowing that he's tried as hard as he possibly can. And it's great to see him out there, and we wish him all the very best with hopefully a few more races in the future for somebody that 79 tests wasn't it for England, and 226 wickets and 5 centuries along the way as well. Arguably one of the best all-rounders we've ever had, and of course in his brief boxing career unbeaten. 1 fight, 1 win for Fred it was. So he is at the wheel of the number 10 Ginetta in this race and continues around the circuit. Where is he running? He thought that he might be towards the tail end. Well, with a few issues that we've had for others, 36 cars having qualified, Fred's now running in 33rd position and 6th in his group, so not a bad first race for him. So the clearing up being done around the circuit. We will await the confirmation as to when the safety car will be in. Now, the Ginetta, the number 10 car, was running in a different specification yesterday. They've worked on it overnight, so it's actually moved groups. It's running in Group GTA now, so it is a full Ginetta Super Cup specification car now. That means changing the rear wing and changing a few other things on it. So weaving being done to make sure everybody is keeping their temperature in their control tyres. There is the Radical RXC, the number 7 car. Going through there is the 61 car of John Dillon. Now, whilst that is towards the front of the queue behind the safety car, remember it did come into the pit lane and have a tyre change, so it's actually a lap adrift, that number 61 car. So it's 88 Richard Neary that leads and leads Group GT3. Second is number 5, which is Richard Chamberlain, who leads Group GTO. Third is number 55, John Seal. Fourth is the black Lamborghini, which is Lucky Kira. And then after that, it is Graham Tilley, who is in fifth position. and Ben Dimmock at the wheel of the Radical, who completes the top 6. So we get the race back underway. The green flag waves, no overtaking until they get to the start-finish line. So they are in single file as they come over the start-finish line. The clearing up has been done, and with 9 minutes remaining, we can get the race back underway. But of course, all of those battles now are fully formed again, because everybody has been bunched up behind the safety car for the last 2 or 3 laps. Richard Chamberlain will try and hang on to the coattails of Richard Neary, but Richard Neary will want to try and make good his escape if he can. So nose to tail. Again, everybody just being cautious on this opening lap of the restart, but equally if there's an opportunity, they'll want to try and squeeze their way through. Graham Tilley, the man in the wheel of the Nissan, was coming under pressure, but that was the lapped car of John Dillon that was behind him. Now, Graham might not be aware that the Lamborghini trying to sneak up the inside is a lap adrift. He's certainly trying to keep it behind Graham Tilley, who has never won a championship. He's been close on several occasions. He's a very, very quick and rapid racer, is Graham, working with Will Tregertha. John Seal has a little bit of contact between himself and Richard Chamberlain. The Lamborghini up the inside of the Porsche. Now, saw a bit of bodywork fly off. Was that just a dive plane, or is that going to cause more problems with that wheel-to-wheel contact? Could possibly create something like a puncture. Let's hope not. Richard Chamberlain carrying on his merry way. John Seal having moved through now and up into 2nd position, but he is also coming under attack from the Lamborghini of Lucky Kira that sits behind. There's certainly a little bit of right rear bodywork flapping on that number 55 Lamborghini, but it's what it's done to the Porsche as well that we need to keep an eye towards, because that orange car is dropping through the field by the look of things. Yeah, wouldn't surprise me if we see Richard Chamberlain destined for the pit lane at the end of this one. Great fight on for 2nd and 3rd place. John Seal still lying now in the lead, I suppose, of Group GTO with that overtake there, because it was for the lead of the group. He's got the GT3 spec Lamborghini of Lucky Kira sitting behind. They accelerate their way over the start-finish line. They might look identical, but as we say, they run in different groups. Graham Tilley in the Nissan now up into 4th place, up to 5th. We should now see Ben Dimmock at the wheel of the Radical move up into 5th position. Yeah, there goes the black Radical, and 6th is number 34. That's the Group GTB leading Porsche that we've got, which is going to be Sam Randon in this race. John Seal was a little bit late there on the brakes turning in towards Wilson. Didn't quite get the car rotated, which almost gave the opportunity for the Lucky Kira car to sneak its way through and up the inside, but the door was just about closed in time, and the key thing there was John Seal getting off the corner quickly as well. So he is still under pressure. He is feeling it. Now, if he lets that black Lamborghini go through, it won't affect the amount of championship points that John Seal scores. But ever being a racing driver, he'll want to hang on to it. The car that was bouncing over the curbs there was the car that was a lap adrift, John Dillon, having come into the pit lane and changed that front left tyre. He is now circulating way down the order still in 34th position when we got the safety car out of harm's way. Arguably one of the quickest cars out on track though. So 6 minutes of the scheduled 25 still remaining. There you can see the gap that Richard Neary has opened up over the squabble for 2nd and 3rd place. John Seal at the moment just making sure that he keeps that black Lamborghini of Lucky Kira behind. If they hold each other up, don't rule out the fact that Nissan of Graham Tilley in 4th position overall and running 3rd in Group GT3 could begin to close up. Still together as they head round through the daunting, never-ending but very fast right-hander at Coram, which is difficult corner really, because you need to get the car straightened up. It's still turning towards the right, but you need to brake in a straight line and almost increase the brake pressure around through there. You start on it, you can trail brake into the corner and slowly increase the pressure so that you don't end up with the tail end of the car starting to snap round on you. Knock it down the gear, throw it into the left-hander at Murray's, and again make sure you get a good exit out of Murray's. There goes the Radical. There goes the Porsche that leads its group. And then we should shortly after that have another group leader coming up as well. There's Nick Phelps. Now he is at the wheel of number 35 car. Made good progress, gained a place, got himself inside the top 10 on that lap. 911 is David Franklin, fighting away with Alex Stevenson, whilst James Guest tries to thread his way through as well at the wheel of the Feathers Motorsport Aston Martin. Remember, he leads the Sprint Cup standings at the wheel of that white and blue and day-glow orange Aston Martin, so he'll be keen to try and get himself onto the coattails of cars and work their way past. Having dispatched Alex Stevenson behind him and into the mirror, the next car he's chasing down is in a different group to him, which will be David Franklin's red Porsche. James Guess, he is running a little way off where you'd expect him to be. He's 10th in the group at the moment and only in 28th position. So back to John Seal and Lucky Kira. Order still as was, despite the best efforts of Lucky Kira. He's not been able to snatch second place away from John Seal. This is a squabble for 17th and 18th position, which is going to be the number 41 car, which for this race is in the hands of Fraser Smart, coming under attack from Craig Wilkins that sits behind, Group GTC Lamborghini, Group GTA Ginetta. And no matter where you look in GT Cup, there are always fights going on. Nice to see the 96s back out as well, because there were power-assisted steering problems for that car in qualifying. So Chris Kemp didn't get that many laps in that car, but thankfully Stanbridge Motorsport have been able to sort the issue out. And as for the 41 of Fraser Smart, through goes Craig Wilkins, and now the orange Marcos in the hands of Andy Roby also is able to sneak its way through, so that car is just dropping down through the order now. Started this lap in 17th, should be now down into 19th position. Now we'll try and re-attack. He's too far away coming in towards Murray, surely to try and re-attack the car of Andy Roby. Andy Roby's car running in Group GTB, which is for the older spec challenge cars. It's Group GTC for the Lamborghini, the newer spec challenge car. And it wouldn't surprise me if maybe there were a further place lost there as well. Yeah, I think over the start-finish line there, 3 places gained on that lap for Chris Kemp, so he's going well. As for the progress of Freddie Flintoff as well, and he's running in 32nd position at the moment and still lying 6th in Group GTA, but it's signatures on the licence for Fred. First ever competitive motor race for Freddie Flintoff. And as we say, really on the back foot coming into this weekend. Lucky Kira's finally managed to unlock the door, sneaks up the inside of John Seal as they head in towards Williams. Graham Tilley is also coming under attack from the car that sits behind, which is John Dillon, but remember the number 61 car behind the Nissan is a lap adrift following its visit into the pits. So even if there's an overtake there, it won't affect the overall position for that Lamborghini because of all of the time that was lost earlier on in the race. And this is another fight that's just going on down towards the bottom of the Bentley Straight. The number 47 Ultimate Speed Aston Martin, driven solo by Mike Brown over the course of this weekend, is under attack from the overall championship leading car, the number 9 car in the hands of Jensen Lum. That's 8th place overall for Jensen Lum and leads the group, so it's good championship points again for the current championship leaders. Now John Seal coming under attack from the Nissan of Graham Tilley. That is Steve Glynn, I'm afraid, that's had a spin at the wheel of the Marcos Mantis. Hopefully he'll be able to get the car back pointing in the right direction as Graham Tilley looks at the inside of John Seal. This is for position 2 GT3 cars absolutely together. They lean on each other, almost heading round through Ritchie's. Through goes John Tilley, takes the place away, and the number 61 car of John Dillon also takes the opportunity as well. So through goes Graham Tilley, through goes John Dillon. And John Seal now loses out to both, but only in reality loses the one place because the Lamborghini, remember, as I said, lap adrift. Now we're into the final minute of this race almost now. So that will move Graham Tilley up into the overall podium places, which is not the first time it's finished in the overall podium places. It's been consistent finishing in 3rd place generally throughout the course of the season. Of the 4 races at Donington Park, it was 3rd in 3 of them, 4th in the other. We got to Brands Hatch, it was 3rd in the first of the races there and sadly had a non-finish in the second following a little bit of contact out on circuit. So another 3rd position would be good. The car that's attacking him though, he can afford to just let go through really, because John Dillon, as we say, is lying at the moment down in the mid-30s in terms of positions. 33rd I think he is at the moment. So yeah, 33rd position John Dillon. So the Nissan doesn't matter really, he can just, if he wants to, blend out of the throttle. As for Richard Neary though, it's looking at a solid start to the weekend for him. A little bit of dust raised from Graham Tilley as he is a little bit wide exiting Nelson, but for Richard Neary, yet again through comes the ABBA Racing Mercedes to claim another win. That's its 5th overall win of the season. We will see Lucky Kira finish in 2nd place, and it certainly looks as though this number 4 Nissan should finish in 3rd position. There goes Lucky Kira over the start-finish line to finish in 2nd position. 3rd place will go the way of the Nissan now. over the start finish line. So it's GT3 cars first, second and third. There goes the Radical. That will be fourth overall and the winning group GTO for that Radical. But there are still scores to be settled. Andy Roby nips up the inside of the Mercedes of Morgan Tilbrook. So through goes Andy Roby, and Morgan Tilbrook also might need to watch out here because he's got Craig Wilkins trying to attack him. That's going to be for something like 4th and 5th in Group GTH and something like 16th and 17th places overall. So over the start finish line come the rest of the runners, and I think what we are going to see is another group win also, for the champions from last year, which is important as well. The number 1 McLaren coming through in the hands of Josh Jackson for that race to claim a win. For Freddie Flintoff, well, he is going to finish the race. He is going to have picked up positions as well because he started 10th the number 10 car from 36th position on the grid, did Freddie Flintoff, and in his first ever race he is going to take the checkered flag in what I suspect is going to be 31st position. So we'll just await the arrival of him over the start finish line, and more importantly, it's as he said he wanted to do, keep his nose clean, finish the race, stay out of trouble and get a signature on his racing licence, and that is exactly what the former England cricket captain has done. So through comes Freddie Flintoff and takes the checkered flag, first checkered flag of his motor racing career, and well, he's ticked all of the boxes that he wanted to do, so well done to him for absolutely bringing that car home to the checkered flag. So that is our first sprint race done and dusted. I'm hoping that very shortly we might be able to guide you through the results of what was an intriguing race. So just to confirm the results then, it is Richard Neary, number 88, that claims the win and the winning Group GT3. Second was 247 Lucky Kieran. Third was number 4, which was Graham Tilley. Fourth, the winning Group GTO went the way of Ben Dimmock, and in fifth it was our Group GTB leader, the number 34 Porsche in the hands of Sam Random. Sixth place was number 47 Mike Brown. Seventh was number 55 John Seal. Eighth was the Group GTC winner, which was Jensen Lunn at the wheel of the number 9 Lamborghini. Ninth was the Brabham number 28 Paul Bailey, and 10th was number 35 Nick Phelps with the Porsche. The other group winners outside of the top 10, just to pick them up, was car number 212, which won Group GTA. That was the Make It Happen Racing Ginetta of Chris Hart. We also saw a group win in Group GTH for the number 1 McLaren, which was Josh Jackson for that race, and I think that picks up on all of our group winners for round 7 of the 2021 GT Cup Championship season. But that's not it for today. We will see these cars back out on circuit, and we will be back with some live footage from them when they come back out onto track for the first of the pit stop races of the weekend, and they are scheduled to get that underway with the red lights going out and the race getting underway at around about 15:45 this afternoon if we run to timetable. Our stream therefore should go live at around about 3:30 this afternoon. So that's it for the moment from Snetterton. Round 7 of the championship done and dusted, but don't go anywhere. You can join us at 3:30 there or thereabouts this afternoon for round 8 of the 2021 GT Cup Championship season from Snetterton. Until then, goodbye.